Welcome back to Dead Reckoning, the Human Life Expectancy channel. So far in this series, we've proposed that advancing global human life expectancy, what we call HLE, is a worthy objective, and presented the Dead Reckoning framework to help make it happen. In our videos with red banners, we've presented the history of human life expectancy, showing the evolutionary context for increasing HLE, how we've managed to more than double HLE since 1900, and how we die today. In our videos with green banners, we've presented new life-extending technologies and medical advances that could increase HLE by treating or curing many diseases, and potentially even curing aging itself. In our videos with orange banners, we've also presented potential new causes of death and ethical and regulatory restrictions that might reduce HLE or slow its rate of advancement. So now we're in a position to put it all together, to consider the things that might reduce and increase HLE going forward, and to answer the question, how much longer will we live? The only intellectually honest way to approach this prediction is to be transparent about our own desires. At Human Life Expectancy, Inc., we wholeheartedly admit to wanting as many people as possible to live as long as possible, as soon as possible, and recognize the bias that this may impart. We also admit that future HLE depends on many things we don't yet know. As a result, the best we can do is to transparently provide our dead reckoning as to how important elements of this might play out individually and how they might collectively roll up to impact HLE going forward. That's what we do in this video. This framework will also allow you to change these assumptions and come to your own conclusions as you wish. It's important that we attempt to answer this question. Since survival is our primary instinct and extending HLE will have enormous impacts on our lives, businesses, and societies, it's astonishing to us that HLE estimates aren't yet among the most closely tracked, debated, and managed statistics in the world. Robert Sinsheimer wrote about, quote, the moral necessity of anticipation as we move increasingly into a world of our own making. And as gerontologist Aubrey de Grey said, we really are on the brink of bringing aging under medical control. Gerontologists have a duty to publish time frame predictions of life expectancy. So, here's our shot. To start, we have to establish which group of people we're talking about and over what time frame. Since our objective is to help as many people as possible live as long as possible, as soon as possible, we chose to consider the global population in this effort. More refined forecasts for different countries, regions, and groups are necessary and will surely follow. As to time frame, we thought that 20 years would be long enough to allow for currently embryonic technologies, such as genetic engineering, to take root, but short enough to feel relevant and incite action today. However, in our next video, Is Humanity Doomed?, we consider a much longer time frame and come to a surprising conclusion. Now, on to the calculation itself. While the exact process we used relies on advanced population and actuarial science, it's fair to say that three key questions drove our estimate of future HLE. The first question is, what will be the rate of technological and medical advancement? The second, how quickly might the advancements be adopted? And the third, what new causes of death might arise? Let's start with the first question. How fast might technologies and medicine advance over the next 20 years? While we explored this in detail for each new technology individually, we think 4 levels of advancement are worthy of consideration across all of these advancements. The first level is historical linear improvement. In our video, How Did We Double Human Life Expectancy?, we saw that advancements in antibiotics, pasteurization, and public health were largely responsible for the historical average rate of 3.3 years increase in HLE every 10 years. This seems like a safe lower end of advancement. While it may be true that some of the gains made over the last 20 years, such as reducing communicable diseases among the young, might have been easier to get than future reductions, this could well be offset by the increasing speed with which advances are discovered and shared globally over the internet. Moreover, our 100-year track record of achieving this rate of advance suggests we might do at least this well going forward. The second level is enhanced progress. From our technology videos, the experts we interviewed indicated that many life-extending technologies could advance faster than the historical rate. This level takes their forecasts for advances in new technologies into account, but excluding the effect of curing aging itself. For example, advances in non-medical and information technologies seem highly likely to increase HLE. In addition, as we noted in our New Technologies videos, advances in cell therapies and genetics, for example, genetic engineering and epigenetic testing, and limited progress in rewriting the genome and epigenome, would likely have made impacts on heart disease, cancer, genetic, and many other diseases. The third level is moderate progress in curing diseases and some progress in curing aging. This level also assumes that we make some progress in curing aging itself, for example, using stem cells, genetic engineering, blood augmentation, and nanotechnology. The fourth and final level is breakthrough progress in curing aging. This most aggressive level of advancement also assumes moderate progress in curing diseases, but adds that we make breakthrough progress in curing aging itself. On to the second question. What levels of adoption of new life-extending technologies might we expect? We envision 3 potential levels over the next 20 years. The first is slow global adoption. This level assumes that the historical rate of adoption continues into the future. As a practical matter, adoption will always be uneven, as those with wealth pay to have early access, or one country supports new advances more than another, etc. Yet, this level assumes that overall advances will be adopted at the historical rate. It assumes most life-extending technologies are largely available around the globe, but that current levels of resistance to these new advances remain into the future. The second level is fast global adoption. This is the optimal level for enhancing HLE. It assumes that individuals, businesses, and governments get serious about the goal of helping people to live longer, minimizing resistance, and accelerating progress in HLE. Still, this rate of adoption is limited by the development timeline for these technologies themselves. This scenario involves an additional 5-year delay beyond development for the adoption of each key technology. Realistically, some will have access to technologies before others, but this scenario assumes that these differences are not so large that they engender significant conflict between the haves and the have-nots, which could slow adoption. And the third level is selective adoption. This level assumes that HLE extending technologies are only available for 20% of the global population. Since 20% of people currently control approximately 50% of global wealth, wealth could prove to be the primary selection criteria at this level, as those with the means to travel to gain access to new HLE advancing technologies do so. However, country, age, or other factors could also likely play roles in selection. This adoption scenario reflects a higher probability of conflict between the haves and the have-nots of life-extending technologies, further delaying adoption. Let's now move on to the final question. What levels might we expect for new causes of death? We envision 3 levels over the next 20 years. Low, with minimal additional deaths from IT and new medical procedures going forward. Medium, which assumes that we have one or a few instances where nuclear or biological weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, are used. And high, where we also assume that we experience a global cataclysm due to climate change or a black swan natural event, such as a supervolcano eruption or a sizable meteor strike. We then combine these levels into 5 internally consistent scenarios for HLE over the next 20 years. Scenario 1, which we call the historical scenario, is for HLE to advance largely as it has in the past. It involves the slowest rate of technological advancement, current slow rates of global adoption of advances, and low impact from new ways to die. We believe this is a conservative scenario since technological and medical advances are generally thought to be accelerating, and digital communication and increasingly free markets should allow the faster flow of ideas and technologies going forward. Scenario 2 is the best case scenario for people living longer. This scenario includes breakthrough progress in aging, allowing for material extension of HLE. It also assumes relatively low resistance, which might occur if humanity comes to understand and prioritize life-extending technologies as we argue they should. Scenario 3, technological backlash, is less optimistic. It assumes that there's significant backlash to the breakthrough technological advances assumed in Scenario 2. It involves shutting down advances in curing aging, such as genetic engineering and the other technologies we've covered. However, it assumes that the 20% of the global population that currently controls over 50% of global wealth is able to access these new technologies. It also involves increased deaths from conflict between the haves and the have-nots of these new technologies. Scenario 4 is the middle road scenario. Rather than breakthrough progress in curing aging, this scenario involves significant advancement in one or two technologies that cure aging. It also assumes a middle road for curing diseases and addressing other current causes of death, and assumes historical rates of global adoption and medium impacts from new ways to die. Finally, Scenario 5 assumes that we have a black swan event. It starts with the same assumptions as the middle road scenario, number 4, but then assumes selective adoption and that we suffer a cataclysm that results in a 10% reduction in global human population in the next 20 years. This scenario also envisions that only the wealthiest 20% of global population has access to new life-extending technologies, as global coordination is compromised as countries turn inward to focus on their cataclysm-related needs. While we have no expectation that any of these scenarios will play out exactly as forecast in the future, they can help us envision how HLE might evolve going forward. So, how likely are these scenarios going forward? Let's start with the assumption that these scenarios span the space of potential outcomes. So our job, then, is to divide 100% across these 5 scenarios. The hardest scenario to predict is the black swan scenario. This is a seriously bad scenario for humanity. It assumes that a black swan event causes 10% of humanity to die, which for comparison is about 100 times more than the pessimistic estimated yearly deaths from pandemics, weapons of mass destruction, and climate change we covered in our New Deaths from AI and Natural Cataclysms video. However, because the most likely trigger of a black swan event is climate change, which we humans have a clear role in creating, and more importantly, an obligation to minimize and remediate, we weight this scenario's probability of occurrence at what we hope is an outsized 5%. We've chosen to weight the most likely middle road scenario by 25% and the other scenarios by 20% each. While this description is oversimplified, roughly, combining these ranges in our HLE forecasting model resulted in our finding that HLE will expand by at least 10 years in the next 20 years. Said another way, if we believe future technology advancement and adoption are at least this positive, and new ways to die will prove no worse than indicated in these scenarios, HLE should expand by at least 10 years in the next 20. Having made this forecast, we know it will change over time. We'll track global HLE on the Human Life Expectancy channel and post periodic updates. We also welcome the opportunity to collaborate with you or others with different or updated perspectives on how HLE will evolve going forward. Please forward any information or contacts. So, how does this forecast compare to others? In short, our forecast of HLE is higher than others that do not factor in medical advances and new technologies. For example, the United Nations, World Health Organization, and other NGOs do a great service to humanity by providing estimates of human life expectancy. But their forecasts are based on historical HLE growth and do not explicitly account for technological and medical advances. Starting with detailed country-by-country demographic information, they extrapolate historical trends for major diseases and other causes of death. They also consider information on historical public health efforts, socio-political circumstances, and historical events such as natural disasters and civil conflict. They use the same cohort-based approach that we do in forecasting HLE. While there's no single right way to make assumptions about the future, the Census Bureau relies heavily on extrapolations of historical trends and indications. As such, they're subject to recency bias, the notions that things that happen in the future will go the way they have gone in the past. Importantly, this means they cannot reflect the accelerated advancements in medicine and new technologies that we have argued will extend HLE going forward. As such, it's not surprising that they forecast a smaller increase of about 4 years over the next 20 years versus our forecast of at least 10 years over the same period. Another source of HLE estimates is from actuaries that produce forecasts of life expectancy for use in insurance and financial service industries. Health and life insurance companies make money by collecting payments or premiums from their customers and paying out settlements when their customers either get sick or die. In order to remain solvent over time, total premiums they take in, plus any interest earned on past collected premiums, must be larger than the settlements they pay out and expenses they incur. The same applies for entities that provide pensions and annuities, only in reverse. In pensions and annuities, customers or their employers give money to the provider in exchange for a series of payments that often last as long as the annuity holder lives. In order to determine the premiums for insurance and investments and payments for pensions and annuities, these companies need to forecast how many of their customers might die and when. To do this, they hire actuaries to collect historical data on how many of their customers have died and extrapolate this data into the future. Since HLE has made great progress historically, such forecasts reveal significant reduction in mortality over time for the life insurance population. The Society of Actuaries in the United States extrapolates this historical trend in producing their life tables and assumes a 1 to 1.5% yearly improvement in mortality rates. So, for example, if the mortality risk for a 65-year-old man is 0.05 per 100,000, the risk for a 65-year-old man next year is calculated as 0.05 times 0.99, or 0.0495. Some insurance companies factor this improvement into their premiums, resulting in lower prices for their customers, and others do not, resulting in higher, as they call it, embedded margin for those companies. However, once again, this historically based approach fails to take into account the acceleration of medical advances and new life-extending technologies we've covered in the Dead Reckoning series. Why haven't others reflected how new technologies will impact future human life expectancy? We're not sure, but here's some thoughts. Actuaries and population scientists may be unfamiliar with new technologies and not practiced at keeping up with their rapid development. Academics generally don't have an incentive to stick their necks out, and any forecast is wrong as soon as it's published, and the cost of being proven wrong can be high for academics. Insurance companies are naturally risk-averse and have an incentive to view new reductions in mortality as embedded margin, that is, unexpected windfalls that should benefit them rather than reduced risk that should result in falling premiums. However, continuing to do this in an environment where mortality risk decreases significantly, as we anticipate, will result in premiums that are uncompetitively high and loss of market share and value for insurance companies. Other corporations, while they might produce estimates for internal use, might not feel that forecasting HLE is their place, or they might not find it to their advantage to share this information with others. For their part, government institutions tend to place more focus on population growth statistics than on life expectancy statistics. But as we've argued, if future changes in life expectancy differ from the past trends will be insufficient for predicting the future. New technologies and medical breakthroughs that offer the prospect of step-level changes in human life expectancy simply can't be divined through historical extrapolation. So, in summary, no one knows for sure how quickly HLE will advance, but the high probability that it will advance more quickly and the high impact of its advancement are large enough that we must now predict and track its advance on an ongoing basis. To do this, we developed the Dead Reckoning methodology, where we combine the impacts of new life-extending technologies on HLE with other factors that could slow its advance under 5 future scenarios. Overall, we found that global HLE will likely expand by 10 or more years in the next 20 years. This is higher than other forecasts of HLE that rely on historical extrapolation because it reflects our expectation that future medical and technological advances will be more rapid than those of the past. If HLE extends at anything close to this rate, it will transform our lives, our commerce, and our societies, and we've got a lot to do to prepare. In our next set of videos, the ones with blue banners, we'll explore potential implications of living longer on our lives, our businesses, and our societies. In the meantime, please hit the like button below, subscribe to the Human Life Expectancy channel to make sure you don't miss our next videos, and post comments for the topics you'd like to have us cover. Thanks for joining us. Till next time, as we say at Human Life Expectancy Inc., hi hua! Please, do what you can to help yourself and help us all to live longer.